Welcome to Your Strata Property, the podcast for property owners looking for reliable, accurate, and bite-sized information from an experienced and authoritative source.
Hello and welcome to this week's podcast episode. I'm your host, Strata lawyer Amanda Farmer. This week, we are talking about brand new legislation in New South Wales, most of which is due to start in February 2025. It's all about increasing the disclosure obligations of our strata managers. This new legislation intended to deal with some of the poor practices that have been highlighted this year by the media, poor practices, bad behaviour on the part of some strata managers. This is legislation that I had a close look at last week during our Friday live session on the Your Strata Property Facebook page. Today I am bringing you a section, a snippet, if you like, of that live chat. It was a popular one, lots of comments, lots of opinion on this legislation, both from strata managers and from owners. Yes, it does affect our owners as well. You're welcome to head over to our Facebook page and listen to the complete discussion we had on this subject last Friday. During that session, I also talked about some new legislation that has just commenced for our community schemes in New South Wales, regulating the keeping of animals. For too long, our law, so far as it relates to strata schemes, has been a little bit different to the law relating to community schemes when it comes to the keeping of animals. Now with this new legislation, which commenced on the 1st of November 2024, the rules about pets are aligned. If you want to know more about that, head over and listen to the complete Friday live session. Link to that one in the show notes for this episode. That's also the place where you'll catch the full unedited chat about these new disclosure obligations for our strata managers, including some of the comments, some of the opinion that was coming through from the live audience. What you're going to hear now is my summary of the impact of the legislation. I was going through this live and sharing my computer screen at the time. The website that I was sharing and I was working through is the New South Wales Government webpage that describes this legislation. That's a good one to have a look at. It gives a good summary of the effect of this legislation. Link to that particular webpage in the show notes. You're also going to hear my opinion, what I think about this legislation. Does it really cure? Does it fix at all those practices that we've been hearing about this year through the media, that we've been talking about on this platform and many others? When I posted a little teaser for this week's episode over on LinkedIn a few days ago, it did attract a very insightful, I'm going to say, in my view, very insightful comment from Professor Kathy Sherry, who I know many of you know, including as a past guest here on the show. Professor Kathy Sherry posted these words, and I'm repeating them because I don't think there's a better way to put it. If a practice is not in the interests of an owner's corporation, disclosing it does not miraculously cure that. If it is unfair, uncommercial, or just a bad deal, the fact that an owner's corporation was told and, quote, agreed, does not mean it's okay. It just means people have been given a dud deal by someone who is their agent. That is, the person who is meant to be working for them. Couldn't have said it better myself. Kathy, thank you for that contribution. It is the case that this new legislation requires strata managers, when one of their owners' corporations is entering into a contract with a person who is connected to the agent, or when the agent is receiving a commission or a training service, this new legislation does say that the agent has to provide details about why the approval of this contract, approval of this commission or training service is in the owner's corporation's best interest. So that's a change, that's something new. Strata managers have to provide details about why these arrangements, which might on their face look to benefit the strata manager, why they are in the owner's corporation's best interest. The owner's corporation has to have that information before they approve the contract, the commission or the training service. But I think you can kind of guess what a strata manager would say when they're giving details about why something like this is in the owner's corporation's best interest, I think they're going to say, my receipt of this commission, this training service, this payment perhaps from a third party, it keeps your management fee down. Without this payment, I'm going to have to charge you more in management fees. Now, I say that is too simplistic an explanation, and it does not identify or grapple with at all the obvious conflict of interest that arises when an agent recommends a particular service provider, whether that's a broker, an insurer, a software company, a loan provider, even a lawyer, where that service provider is paying the strata manager a commission or providing a service that benefits the manager rather than the owner's corporation, or perhaps is even themselves a company that is connected to the strata manager. If the owner's corporation engages that service provider, then the strata manager is receiving a benefit, usually a financial benefit. Therein lies the conflict of interest, and it's very likely going to be the case, unless an owner's corporation is particularly sophisticated, perhaps has committee members with their own legal training, committee members with board training or training in corporate governance. It's going to be very hard for owners to recognise the impact that that conflict could have down the track. If that service provider doesn't perform, they do dodgy work, if they breach a contract, the strata manager is, consciously or not, going to be in a bit of a sticky situation if they have financially benefited themselves from that contract. And we see this happen time and again. You'll hear me talk about an example of it in this upcoming chat where strata managers are connected to or have done work for or have given advice to developers. That's all I'll say by way of intro for now. I'll take you over to that part of our Friday live chat that walks through the impacts of the new disclosure legislation for our New South Wales strata managers. I'm always keen to hear your thoughts, whether you're a strata manager, an owner, a committee member. Feel free to leave a comment under this episode over on the website. You'll find this one and our 400 plus past podcast episodes over at yourstrataproperty.com.au/podcasts. Here we go. The Strata Managing Agents Legislation Amendment Act 2024. We have talked about this on live previously when it was proposed. I think it was a bill at that stage, and it may have gone through the upper house. We now have commencement dates for this legislation. And if you haven't heard about it before, don't panic. I am going to walk you through the outline of what it covers. But what we've heard within the last few days is that from today, the 8th of November, the enforcement and regulatory powers that fair trading has under some of these provisions are going to take effect. So fair trading has more powers as of today. And from the 3rd of February, 2025, the increased disclosure requirements for strata managers under this legislation is going to commence. So from your perspective as strata managers, and you'll be able to see in a moment from your perspective as owners, this is really important as well to be aware that strata managers are going to have to give some more disclosure as of the 3rd of February, 2025. If you are engaging a new strata manager or thinking about engaging a new strata manager around or after that time, if you are thinking of reappointing your current strata manager, their contract is up for renewal, I suggest you pay particular attention to these changes because there's going to be a little bit of a checklist for you to think about, to be aware of, to make sure your new strata manager or your current strata manager, when they're renewing their contract, complies with a checklist of disclosure requirements. And I'm saying this out loud, checklist, and I'm making a mental note that a checklist, as you often tell me you find helpful, may be something that I'll be able to prepare for you around that time or for you to use from February 2025 to get across these disclosure requirements and make sure that your strata manager is complying with them. Checklists sound like a good idea. It's probably going to sound like a good idea after I go through the high-level summary of what these changes are because they are a little bit detailed Dirt is saying, good to know that fair trading now has more power in relation to disciplining strata managers who behave unlawfully. Let's have a look at exactly what these changes are. While what I have on the screen here is the legislation itself, it's a little bit dense and it's a little bit hard to wrap your head around when you read amending legislation, because it says things like insert this section, omit this section, amend that section, and hard to read when it is sitting in isolation like that. What I'm going to do instead is to take you over to the fair trading summary. And I think this summary is pretty good. I have some comments about it. I want to draw your attention to a few things as I go through it. But this is a great starting point for you to get your head around, both as strata managers and as owners, what these changes mean, and particularly what should be happening from the 3rd of February next year. This is a page that talks generally about changes to strata laws, but it does get into detail about these expanded disclosure requirements for strata managers that, as I said, start on the 3rd of February. And they're supported by stronger New South Wales fair trading enforcement and regulatory powers starting today, the 8th of November, 2024. These changes are needed to improve oversight of strata managers and to know whether they're acting in the owner's corporation's interests. The changes are going to make insurance arrangements more transparent and equip owners' corporations with clear and timely information to inform decision-making and enable scrutiny of their strata managers' actions and interests. Now, in reading some of the emails from various industry bodies, commentary from some strata lawyers, commentary from stakeholders about these changes, I kind of walk away with the impression that there's a message being sent that these changes are radical, that these changes are the answer to what the ABC has been reporting, the behaviours, the poor practices that the ABC has been reporting since about March this year. And the reason that I wanted to spend so much time on this today is that I don't agree with that. I don't think these changes are radical. I don't think that these changes solve the problems or prevent the behaviour that owners have been complaining about, that has been identified in the media. And I think the messaging that they are and the messaging that this is a strong response is unhelpful. I'm saying that straight up. There's no big reveal here about what I think. Bill and Ben saying a radical answer, and he's laughing. Thank you, Bill and Ben. I'll go through this and you let me know what you think. I love this forum because I know how many strata managers are here tuning in. I would love your thoughts on this as well. But I kind of get to the conclusion that it's business as usual, even with this new legislation. Let me know what you think. Oh, Sean M's already jumping in saying, I agree, agreed. All right, so let's have a look at it so that I'm not pitching my view in a vacuum here for you. Timeframes we've talked about. As of today, fair trading has increased enforcement and regulatory powers. I'm not really talking about that too much today. We're going to see how that plays out. 3rd of February 2025. This is probably the meat of the changes. The increased disclosure requirements for strata managers will start. And we're told by fair trading that both owners and managers need to be aware of how these changes impact them. What's going to happen for strata owners? Well, you're going to get extra, more timely information from your strata managers. You're going to get some more paperwork. You're going to get some more documents. You're going to get some more clauses in your contracts. You know those contracts? 2 weeks ago, we had a look at part of those contracts on Friday Live. There's a lot of pages. There's a lot of schedules. There's a lot of words. So there's going to be some more words and pages and schedules. And if that is a comfort to you, please let me know, because I'm being a bit tongue-in-cheek here. I do not see how receiving extra information is helpful to strata owners who find it difficult, if not impossible, to read, to understand, and to digest the information, all of the information that they're already receiving. But this extra information is apparently going to allow you to make better, more informed decisions about how to run your scheme. And it may, if you have the opportunity to read and to understand and to digest all of the extra information. Owners are going to be better informed in making your initial decision about whether to appoint the strata manager, because the strata manager is going to have to disclose some more information. You're going to benefit from more transparent insurance arrangements, and you're strongly encouraged to understand strata managers' increased disclosure requirements so that you can, strata committee members in particular, you can ensure that your strata manager complies. So we've heard that fair trading has increased enforcement and regulatory powers, but strata committee members are being told that you need to understand all of this because you need to ensure that your strata manager complies. That contradiction really stands out to me. Strata managers, what do you need to be aware of? You need to be ready to understand the new disclosure requirements before they start on the 3rd of February. The changes enhance your obligation to provide owners' corporations with more transparent and timely information. This will support your clients to have confidence when the management agreement is being signed and throughout the term of appointment. And if you breach these new disclosure obligations, there can be court-imposed penalties of up to $110,000 should the matter end up in a court, which would be the end of the line. This is a summary of the new disclosure requirements that are going to start from the 3rd of February. Strata managers have to disclose more information before they're appointed as well as during their appointment. So I said a little while ago, please be alert to these in particular. If you think you might be entering into a new contract with a strata manager from February onwards next year, and indeed if you're re-signing or reappointing your current strata manager, you're probably going to start to see that the agreements, those templates that we were looking at a couple of weeks ago, they might start to look a little bit different. And I've already seen, at least from one industry association, that they have promised their members that they will be sending out and giving access to updated templates for their members to take into account these additional disclosure requirements. So it will be interesting to see how those templates are adapted to meet these obligations. The changes are making insurance arrangements more transparent. We'll get into that in a little bit more detail. So before a strata manager is appointed, they have to give more information to the owners corporation about connections with suppliers that they routinely use, including details about the nature of that relationship, and if they have given advice about a strata plan or community scheme to the developer in the last 2 years. So something that we have heard owners and some strata managers, I must say, being very concerned about in recent years is this relationship between the developer and the strata manager, where we have a new building that is probably about to face many years of rectifying original building defects, and buildings that have felt they've struggled to get that done because their strata manager isn't supporting them in the process because they have a connection to, they have a commercial relationship with, they want to protect the relationship with the developer because that developer is building other developments and is going to need a strata manager to manage those. So the intention of letting owners know if there is a connection, has the strata manager given advice to the developer of that building about the strata plan, about the community plan in the lead up, that now has to be disclosed. And there is an assumption there that owners are going to read that disclosure and indeed to understand what that disclosure means and what that connection means. So I've just explained to you, because of my many years of experience in this space, I understand what that connection means. I understand that some buildings, not all, but some buildings have experienced a poor response from the strata manager to a building defects claim or to the building defects process because of that strata manager's connection. The new legal requirement is not to explain that. It's not to explain we're connected with, so maybe we have a conflict. The new legal requirement is simply to say we have previously given advice to this developer, and it's leaving the owners to join the dots about what that means. I don't think that it should be left to owners to join the dots. And that is all that increased disclosure does. It arms you with a truckload more information and leaves it up to you to try and work out what all of this information is, to work out whether you're comfortable with it, and then to make a decision whilst drowning under this truckload of additional information. I don't think that solves the problems that we've been facing. During the strata manager's appointment, there are additional requirements for disclosure. Strata managers have to provide the owner's corporation with a written explanation when seeking approval for a commission or training service, and commission is defined to include a fee from a broker for placing insurance. The written explanation will need to include why the approval of the commission or training is in the owner's corporation's interest and provide details about the commission amount. And the owners will review and decide on the approval request at a meeting of the owner's corporation. So this means that strata managers can't receive any commission or a training service without it going through this approval process, unless it has already been included in the management agreement. And I'm reading this in the legislation, and yes, I did have the opportunity to read and participate in submissions on the draft. Submissions were absolutely made by the Australian College of Strata Lawyers. A number of our recommendations were not incorporated into the final version. But in reading this, it just struck me that this is already happening. And tell me if I'm wrong, but isn't it already the case that agency agreements, the contract or the management agreement that the owner's corporation has with the strata manager, they're already disclosing these commissions at least, because some managers will give owners the option. This is the management fee if we receive an insurance commission, which we estimate is in this amount, and this is the management fee if we don't receive an insurance commission. So in my experience and from the agreements that I've seen, commissions are already being disclosed in management agreements, and not just commissions. Third-party payments that a strata manager may be receiving from service providers, for example, software providers, strata loan providers, indeed commissions and payments from brokers, all of that is already being disclosed in the management agreement. And this is what you heard that very high-profile, large strata management firm saying to the ABC when their practices were uncovered or revealed to the Australian public earlier this year. We're not doing anything wrong. Our owners are aware of these connections with third-party service providers. We disclose the commissions and the fees that we're receiving. That's been the response, not just from that company, but from many strata management companies and insurers and brokers who are involved in these remuneration models, let's say. This is all disclosed. It's all in the agreement, and the agreement is approved, must be approved by the owners at a general meeting. I've seen these contracts. The schedules to these contracts list all of the commission percentages, the amounts that the strata manager will be receiving from brokers, from insurers, from third-party service providers. It's all there in the contract. This is already happening. I'm a little bit confused as to why our lawmakers have felt the need to restate, I suppose, this requirement. I guess it goes to new arrangements that might crop up during the course of the engagement, where there are new partnerships that may arise or new relationships between service providers and strata managers. In that case, this new law provides that, yes, that must be disclosed and that must be approved by resolution at a general meeting. But I think all of this unknowingly to owners is already being approved at a general meeting. And I say unknowingly because it is in that back schedule of the strata managers agency agreement that very few people read. And if they do read it, they don't understand it. I think we're just going to be seeing more of that, more of the same, more information that is added to the renewal contract that owners are given, but they're not reading and they don't understand. And I don't think that that solves the problem of the bad behaviour and the poor practices that have been brought to light this year. What would solve the problem, the bad behaviour and the poor practices, is to say that these practices are illegal, that strata managers should not be receiving payments from third parties, that commissions should be banned. That would be the way to be solving the problem. Simply saying these practices are outlawed, not that more disclosure is a cure for the problem. As Dr. Nicole Johnston said, and I brought to you a few months ago, we need to cut the head off the snake, not tread on its tail. Disclosure is only treading on the snake's tail. Cutting the head off the snake is saying it's banned. Strata managers are fiduciaries. They have fiduciary obligations. They should not be profiting from the contracts that they place for their clients. That is not the way a fiduciary operates. Banning third-party payments, banning commissions, perhaps not immediately, but a phased process, maybe what's needed to make sure that our strata managers can adapt and adjust their business models. Surely that's where this has to end up. More disclosure is not the answer. I'm seeing Josh say a couple of things. Josh is saying this is a very interesting space. Josh is also saying, great point. Thank you, Josh. Suzanne is saying, wow. Also totally agree. Kyria is saying, you're right, Amanda. The true transparency will only come if contracts are in plain English and no commissions are allowed. Anthony saying, would that lead to higher strata fees? Well, here's the thing, Anthony. As a strata manager once said to me, and I brought this to life from memory. I don't have permission to reveal the strata manager's name, but I did read out this email in one of our lives. Strata manager said, Amanda, owners are already paying high strata management fees because of all these extras that are factored in. We're already paying high fees for contractors, not just strata management fees, but high fees for contractors because contractors have to give a cut of the action to the strata manager. In some cases, please be aware that these are not the practices of all strata managers. But if the insurer, the broker, the contractor is giving a cut of the action to the strata manager, then you're already paying higher fees, not just for your strata manager, but for your contractor and for your insurer. A fee-for-service model is a different model. For some businesses, it may end up with higher fees. But I keep coming back to that I can't help but feel that that has got to be the only way that you really have true transparency on what it is that you're paying for and can assess whether what you're paying is fair in return for the service that you're being provided. At the moment, you may feel like we get a substandard service and we feel like we're paying a lot and we can't understand why because we can't see exactly what it is that our strata manager is doing or is receiving. If you switch to a complete fee-for-service model, and that doesn't mean that you can't have a fixed fee and then additional fees for other services, but the strata manager is not being remunerated by these other avenues, then I think that you have that transparency, this word keeps being used, that transparency that you actually need to understand whether or that you're getting what you pay for. Julie saying in Victoria, the manager has to obtain the approval from the chairperson at the time of the procurement, so the contract is not enough. I'm interested in that, Julie, procurement of any particular service. So in New South Wales, just to be clear, as I'm going through at the moment, the law says that it's okay for the strata manager to receive commissions or training services are in there as well, as long as they are disclosed, and they don't have to be disclosed on every occasion that they're received. It can be simply disclosed in the management agreement. So that's a disclosure that happens once, potentially in 3 years. That happens once. And that's what's happening now, as far as I can see. Upfront real-time disclosures. Strata manager will need to write to the owners as soon as practicable once they become aware of any connections or interests they have in relation to the strata scheme. Examples, if a strata manager becomes connected to a service provider that the scheme is using or they buy a property in the strata scheme, the strata manager will also need to give the owner's corporation written notice about certain matters before they enter into a contract, including where they will, for example, use a related supplier. As I said, I believe that this disclosure in some strata management firms is already happening. I think it was, from what we heard in the media, I think it was happening in that very high-profile case that the ABC has been so focused on. This disclosure, we're told, was happening. It hasn't stopped owners being upset about it. So there's a link missing here. The disclosure is not enough. It's not getting through to owners. Owners are not understanding what that disclosure means. And I don't see how this legislation makes that any easier for owners to understand. The strata manager has to provide more information at the AGM. So that 150-page agenda that you're already not reading is now going to have more information in it about connections with suppliers. I mean, I think if you come from any other industry, this is just bizarre. This is kind of nutty. Let's just load our clients up with more information about where we're getting our money from, because it makes it okay to get our money from these third parties that then leave us with a conflict of interest when we are recommending their services to the owners. I mean, it's kind of Twilight Zone. I can see Mike Longhurst laughing. He's having the same moment as me. It's bizarre. Okay, so we'll provide more information, letting you know if we have connections with suppliers or the building's developer. And that's on top of your existing obligation to disclose commissions and training services that you've received in the last 12 months. Let's talk about insurance. This one is interesting. And I'm deep in this at the moment because my own building is going through insurance renewal. So I had a close look at this one. Strata managers will need to provide clearly itemised quotes for insurance policies. This includes setting out commission and broker fee amounts, who those are ultimately paid to. The base premium amount of the insurance and the GST is clearly set out. It's good that this is in the legislation because otherwise, at the moment, this is simply a requirement, as I understand it, for SCA New South Wales members. And this came in, I think it was the 1st of June. I've got a copy of it here. I'll flick over to the SCA Best Practice Strata Insurance Disclosure Guide. If you haven't had a look at this, please do, because here's a little tip for you. If you're a committee member, if you're going through an insurance renewal process in the future, I know ours is up for renewal next month, and I went through this guide knowing that our strata manager was an SCA member, and apparently it is now mandatory for SCA members, in order to retain their professional standards accreditation, they must comply with this best practice guide. And the best practice guide, you can have a read of it. It's pretty easy to read. But if you go down to page 3 here, the best practice is that the following items are disclosed in as simple and transparent a fashion as possible as part of the strata insurance quotation and invoicing process. I'm just going to make that a lot bigger for you. That probably helps. So these are the 8 items that must be disclosed when your strata manager, including through a broker, is getting quotes for insurance for you. Disclose these 8 things. I wrote to my strata manager a few weeks ago. I am the treasurer at the moment on my committee. I wrote and I said, I see our insurance is up for renewal. I note you're a member of SCA. Please confirm that you'll be complying with the best practice guideline, including disclosing the 8 items that are in the best practice guideline. Strata manager said, yes, no problem. I have since spoken to a broker who has told me that they are working with strata managers who they know are members of SCA, who are bound by this best practice guideline, and the strata managers are saying, broker, please don't provide me with a quote that has those 8 items on there. We just want the usual. Just do the usual. And broker, good quality broker with integrity, is saying, that's a breach of your obligation as an SCA member. Strata manager is saying, no, let's not rock the boat. Don't want to make those disclosures. So for that reason, if I flick back to what the new legislation is requiring from the 3rd of February, I think this is a good thing, that essentially what SCA's best practice guideline has been put into, as far as I read it, has been put into the legislation. So these 8 things or thereabouts, I'm not sure if exactly 8 the list in the legislation, but these things now, as a matter of law, whether your strata manager is an SCA member or not, are going to have to be disclosed when you get your insurance quotes. You can see this breakdown. I think that's a good thing. I'm looking forward to seeing that breakdown when we get our insurance quotes for our building shortly. Strata managers will be banned from getting a commission on insurance if the owner's corporation obtained the quote and arranged for its payment independently without their help. Rena and I spoke about this on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. I think this is happening anyway. I don't think strata managers who don't arrange insurance are taking commission. Please tell me if I'm wrong. If it is happening, great. It's a good thing to outlaw now. But as I understood it, that was often part of the reason why owners did arrange their own insurance, because they would prefer for that commission not to be paid. Strata managers have to comply with the new obligations when they come into effect in 2025. And if you think your strata manager has breached the new laws, you can report it to New South Wales Fair Trading by making a complaint. That's the summary. I'm very conscious that Fair Trading has directed our strata committee members to be very clear on, very across these new laws, because it's going to be up to you, apparently, to make sure your strata manager is complying, and indeed, as we've read here, to report them to New South Wales Fair Trading if they're not. The result of this, I believe, is going to be heftier agendas, annual general meeting agendas for sure, more documentation for our owners to receive. I'm not going to say read, because I know many of you look, I'm guilty of this too as an owner. Many of you receive information and don't read it or don't have the time to read it or may not understand the importance of reading it. You're about to be receiving a lot more information, and managers have a heavier obligation to be providing this information to you. So you can read that summary. You can go and read the legislation to the extent it makes sense to you. Most of those changes coming into effect in February 2025. Sometimes you guys tell me that you really want my opinion and you feel like maybe sometimes I'd play it a little bit borderline here and don't necessarily tell you what I think. I think I've told you what I think about this one here today. I think it has been a quick response for a government that needed to be seen to be having a quick response to the media's reporting. I am hopeful that it's not the end of the road for reform in New South Wales. I'm a little bit concerned that it is simply more work for strata managers and more responsibility for owners. And we tend to see that a lot in our strata lawmaking and our strata regulations. The responsibility is put on the end of the day on owners to be able to understand this, to pull up their strata manager if they're not doing the right thing. And owners who are not engaged in what's going on, completely understandably, not engaged in what's going on, simply don't realise the need to be on top of these things and how they can be on top of these things. So that's why I like to talk about it in forums like this. So perhaps you can have some more awareness and you know where to come to. You know where to get some help. If you need some support with this, need to understand what questions you should be asking your strata manager. I mentioned a checklist at the beginning of this chat, a checklist of what kind of things now, Amanda, do we need to be looking for on these agendas? What is this disclosure that the strata managers now need to attend to? I think a checklist is definitely something that I can prepare and make available for you so that you can be across this.
Thank you for listening to Your Strata Property, the podcast which consistently delivers to property owners reliable and accurate information about their strata property. You can access all the information below this episode via the show notes at yourstrataproperty.com.au.